So recently, Vinegar Syndrome released Looking for Mr. Goodbar, and on the same month, they put out Sliver. Now, both of these films feature Tom Berenger in a supporting role. He has a larger role in Sliver, but in both films, he has a very similar type of role. But today we're going to talk about the feel-good romantic comedy Looking for Mr. Goodbar, which is based on the candy bar, the Mr. Goodbar candy bar. No, I'm just kidding on that. So this is actually none of that stuff, and we're going to get into the actual plot here in just a bit. And this is a new 4K release by Vinegar Syndrome. And in this video, we're gonna unbox this thing. I'm going to show you what all is included, and I'm eventually going to rate both the film and Vinegar Syndrome's release. Hi, I'm Dave Watkins, Watkins Films. If you haven't done so already, if you go ahead and like this video, subscribe to my channel. Now, this film takes place, at least part of it takes place on New Year's Eve. So it could be considered like a New Year's film, and you might be able to watch it instead of New Year's Evil. Now, New Year's Evil is a lot more fun than this film. Now, this film is going to make you feel a lot more shitty. Looking for Mr. Goodbar is a 1977 film based on a novel by Judith Rosner. We're going to get more into that type of plot here in just a minute. It was directed by Richard Brooks. Richard Brooks previously had directed Blackboard Jungle, and he also directed A Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, based on a stage play. The film he directed starred Paul Newman. He eventually did direct In Cold Blood. In Cold Blood was based on a novel by Truman Capote. But here, I didn't know what to expect really watching this film. Now, my first impression of the film was I really thought it might have been a romantic comedy with a little bit of a dark comedic twist, but there's no real comedy, dark or funny comedy in this whatsoever. And if you look at what the genre it falls in, it kind of falls in the crime drama. But I think in general it leans more towards drama and not so much crime drama, though there is something that happens in the film. And I'm going to tell you what, while I was watching the film, at one point I did think, what is going on in this movie? What's it about? So the film stars Diane Keaton. Now, Diane Keaton previously had been in Woody Allen's Annie Hall, and most people today would know her from that, or from films like Father of the Bride or First Wife's Club and stuff like that. So she's usually a comedic actress, and she's quite funny. But here, she is playing a character. The character is. It's really surprising, to tell you the truth, seeing Diane Keaton in this part, and she has a lot of sex in the film, and she's nude quite often in it. But besides that, the character itself is she seems to display like a borderline personality disorder, or a dual personality. She's a teacher. At first, it shows her as a student, and she's a student in the class, and seems to be kind of a goody-goody, but then she starts to have an affair with the teacher, and that goes on for a while, and then so the teacher's married, of course, and eventually he breaks it off and breaks her heart or whatever. It deals with that and her home life. Her dad's very confrontational about her behavior, and her sister's also having lots of issues too. Her sister marries a much older man, and she goes through different marriages, and she's always kind of seems to be in some dire straits herself. Her sister's played by Tuesday Weld, but for the first part of the movie, at least for the first half hour or so of the film, it's kind of dealing with that sort of situation. Okay, and so she eventually, like, her dad kind of gives her an ultimatum, and she moves out of the house, and she gets an apartment in New York. So you kind of think maybe she's going to get her shit together. She's a teacher during the day, and she does. You see her doing very good things with these kids who she has to teach them sign language and things of that nature. They're kind of special needs kids. Now the character herself has scoliosis when she was a kid, and she had to have an operation, so she has a scar from that. So she from that, she doesn't really want to have kids, but she enjoys working with kids. But what happens though, so apparently she has this relationship with this teacher who's a pretty shitty guy, really, when it comes down to it, and he's just kind of using her for sex. I mean, she's kind of using him for sex too. But then she moves into this apartment, and then eventually she meets a character played by Richard Gere, who is like a bit of a hustler, and he's an abusive guy, but she's kind of seems to be attracted or drawn to these men who are kind of very dangerous and they have issues. Eventually, around in that part, I think I was like, where's this going? Like you're just seeing this girl who seems like she would be getting her shit together, but instead it's kind of going into a downward spiral of different stuff, including drug use. She starts taking drugs, and it's like, what on earth is this movie about? So I'm like, all right. I paused it, and I'm like, what's up with this thing? I don't even know where it's going. And apparently it's based on a true story about a woman named Roseanne Quinn, who was murdered. Who was a school teacher, and she was murdered on January 2nd, in 1973. So upon that point, then it made sense to me, the crime drama part, but it's basically the movie is setting up. It ends, so basically it ends with this murder, the school teacher being murdered by a man, and the whole film is kind of a setup for her life to go more and more crazy until she's eventually murdered by a guy. So it's a bit of a downer, but it does have a very, very interesting or very intense ending. Now, of course, when you're watching it, apparently in the novel starts. It tells you that she was killed, so you know at the beginning that she's killed. So you're kind of ready for it. It kind of makes it. I guess it kind of makes it a little more surprising if you don't know what it is when you're watching this film, because you think maybe it's just a shitty Lifetime drama with some girl. More and more crazy stuff happens to her, but. Well, I wouldn't go as far as to call it a shitty Lifetime drama, because the acting here, especially by Diane Keaton, is fantastic. She's like fantastic in this film. And the supporting cast, including Richard Gere, William Atherton plays one of the only guys who is kind of a nice guy who becomes interested in her, and he's kind of trying to suit her. And her dad actually likes Richard Atherton's character, but the problem is he also has some issues as well. But she is so damaged that she can't be with him. She'd rather push him away and be with all these other guys, including she starts she'll go to the bar, she'll just go to a bar and pick up an older guy and bring him back to her house and have sex with him. And some of these guys, she's just doing it just because of her borderline personality disorder, which is just kind of that's the main reason why she's doing it. But the guys think that she's a prostitute, so some of the older guys will leave her some money. So she just takes the money. She's like, okay, cool, money. But luckily, if you see that type of situation going on, then if a pimp got wind of that, and he's seeing that happening, that might cause some issues. That doesn't happen in the film. So it is a very unexpected, the film, the way that it is. But once you know what the ending is, and we'll talk about the ending here in just a minute. We're going to look at this release first. But this ending is something. Whoa, it's crazy. But there is a scene earlier in the film that takes place at Christmas in the first 30 minutes, and there's some New Year's there, but it does have that sort of feel at the beginning. And throughout, since this film takes place in 1975, so it has a very nice feel of the 70s, which, if you grew up in the 80s like I did, everything kind of still looked like it does in this film. A lot of people think the 80s looked all bright and flashy, but no, it looks very dark and dingy and smoky like it does in this film. And they do a very nice job of capturing the 70s. Of course, it was significantly easier because it was still the 70s while it was going on. So I really like this slip box. This is it's very simple, looking for Mr. Goodbar, and then you got the man and the woman down here, and again, it doesn't tell you what it is exactly. And on the back side, you got the city from her apartment. A lot of the film takes place in her apartment. There's a booklet. Now, this booklet here has several essays in it written by different people. I took a look at some of them. I didn't read them all the way through, but here's a slipcover with you got a finger in a glass in a drink, and again, a city on the back. And it does a very nice job of actually capturing the city nightlife. And here again, now there is a reversible slipcover on this, and we're going to reversible insert cover, and this is what the original cover looked like. I do like the simplistic new one, even though it doesn't really. I guess this kind of tells you a little bit more, or it kind of has a more of a feel about the way that the film actually is. On the inside, we have both the 4K and a Blu-ray disc. So let's talk about the ending. And like I said, this is based on a true event where a school teacher was stabbed to death on New Year's Eve or on New Year's Day. But so she goes out to the bar like she often does, and throughout this film, Richard Gere's character is a pretty shitty guy. So you kind of think that he might be the person that kills her just because of the way he's abusive and the way he's acting, but he's not. She goes out and she meets a character played by Tom Berenger. Now, before you see this character in a few other scenes, which is kind of weird for the film because you see him by himself in a few scenes, he's actually been with this another guy. I guess he moved to town here and he didn't have a place to stay, and he ended up moving in with this guy, and then other guy was gay, and Tom Berenger's character might be gay, but he seems to be really pushing against it. But he says he just needed a place to stay, but he's also taking some drugs, and so he's really on edge. And she sees him, and she takes him back to her apartment because he has a fight with his boyfriend, and so she takes him back to her apartment, and then they're trying to have sex, and it doesn't go too good, and she starts kind of like making fun of him and stuff like that, and he kind of like loses his mind, and then eventually he takes some more drugs or whatnot, and he's able to so this thing is it's awful, really. He ends up raping her, and then has a knife behind his back, and then he just stabs her to death, and then it's such an awful scene. I mean, it's awful, but it's also it's what the whole film was leading towards, and you hate. I mean, her performance here is fantastic, and it really gave her. I don't think I've ever seen Diane Keaton do something like she's really young here, but just her. I didn't realize that she had this type of range with her acting, because she's very good comedy. She's a very likable actress. Here she's not very likable. Like, you start to really not like her after a while because of everything she's doing. But again, she does have a bit of a mental disorder that's not really diagnosed within the film, but she has one, and that's why she's doing what she's doing. And it's also the times here where there was like a sexual revolution happening in the 70s, and there was a lot of like sudden like women's liberation, and so they, for the first time, they had these freedoms that they may not have had before, and so they were exploring those sort of things. But there was also apparently a lot of danger. So let's go ahead and rate the film. I think the film this is a very important film as far as the subject matter and the way it's presented. It's not a film. While I was watching it, I did not enjoy watching most of it. I actually felt very. Mostly made me feel a little dirty. It made me feel bad for. It made me feel really kind of angry about her character doing the things that she was doing and her downward spiral. So it was hard to watch, but I do appreciate the film. I'm going to give it 3.5 stars. It probably deserves more than that for what it entails. But I think it's a little unsettling, and it's not a very fun film to watch. I do appreciate it. I'm going to give Vinegar Syndrome a 4.5 star rating for this release. The 4K transfer here, it's just looks to be like a 4K. It's probably either from the original negative or from the camera master, but it is a 4K upgrade. It is an older film shot on 35mm. You do see a significant amount of grain here, but it would be there because it is film. You do see a lot of you do see a lot of good shadow detail. It is a lot of this film is kind of dark, but it also kind of as far as the texture, skin textures, you see all that very nicely. But even though it is there's a lot of smoke throughout the scene, so a lot of it is kind of disguised by the smoke. But I think the transfer is authentic to the way that the film is supposed to look. Anyway, let me know what your thoughts are on this film, and if you haven't done so already, go ahead and like this video, subscribe to my channel. I'm Dave Watkins. Thanks for watching.